Mr Speaker, I move that Eric Wilbur Roy be appointed Deputy Speaker. Mr Speaker, Mr Roy is no stranger to anyone in this House, I'm sure, apart from new members, of course, who I'm sure will have seen him in the role of a presiding officer as they've studied Parliament in the lead up to the election. He brings to the role a considerable experience as a parliamentarian. He has experience both as a list and a constituency member of Parliament. And I think anyone who's observed his management of the House will agree that he is a very impartial speaker who offers everybody the sort of opportunity that we would expect. Mr Speaker, I'm delighted to be moving this recommendation and look forward to supporting the motion.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. The Honourable Trevor Mallard.
On behalf of the Labour Party, I would like to endorse the nomination of Eric Roy as Deputy Speaker. I think it's fair to say that we've known each other for a long time. He is seen as someone of the utmost integrity in the House. I think it's also fair to say that while you, Mr Speaker, played on the right wing of the parliamentary rugby team and showed some sidesteps and subtlety, Mr Roy, both on the rugby field and the House, has not been known for that. He and I played in the tight forwards, and I don't think I've ever seen him do a sidestep or avoid taking a hard issue on directly. Mr Speaker, I have the feeling that this might be somewhat of a trial for Mr Roy, whether it's a 90-day trial or something which is slightly longer than that. We are yet to see, Mr Speaker, and I think we'll all look forward to Mr Roy being in the chair, testing him out and seeing when new accommodation, youth seek new accommodation offshore, sir. We'll have another discussion about this. Thank you.
The question is the motion be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The Honourable Leader of the House.
Mr Speaker, I move that William Lindsay Tish be appointed Assistant Speaker. Mr Speaker, like Mr Roy, Mr Tish has been a presiding officer for quite some time and has a reputation for fairness in the way in which he deals with all concerned in the House. Unlike Mr Roy, he's unlikely to have been a front row forward, but nonetheless has managed to avoid any obvious confrontations in his time as a as a presiding officer. Mr Speaker, if there was one disappointment I might personally express about all of this is that Mr Tish has been the chair of the Parliamentary Catering Committee, and I'd have to suggest that there's been relatively few improvements under his watch. But then again, I do have an extra couple of notches pulled in on my belt, so I congratulate him for that. Mr Speaker, I look forward to supporting this nomination and to the continuing work that Lindsay Tish has been offering in this House.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. The Honourable Shadow Leader of the House. The Honourable Shadow Leader of the House.
Yeah. One of those, Mr Speaker. Again, it's the Labour Party's view that Lindsay Tish is the appropriate person to fill this role. We want to congratulate him on it, say that we would have been equally happy if he had been doing the role that he had been previously, because again he's someone who has acted in this House with integrity and has also made himself available to explain his rulings and to work through issues with members, notwithstanding which side of the House they come from. And if there's one bit of advice that I should give to new members, and that is that when something unusual happens in the House, something that is unexpected, it is worth sometime after the event going and having a discussion with either the Leader of the House, myself, or probably with more expertise, one of the 3 or 4 presiding officers, because they are able to explain the rules of the place, which I think it's fair to say on occasion slightly hard to follow. But congratulations, Lindsay.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. Aye. The contrary, no. The ayes have it. The Honourable Leader of the House.
Mr. Speaker, I move that Harold Valentine Ross Robertson be appointed Assistant Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Ross Robertson is in his 25th year as a member of this House and has served in this House for, I think, around about 12 years in the role of presiding officer. So he's a man of great experience. And I'm sure new members will come to enjoy, just as those who have returned enjoy, the hearty afternoon greeting, good afternoon and kia ora to you all, which regularly comes from Ross when he takes the chair. It will also be interesting to see over this term whether or not he can come up with some interesting new fashion combinations. We've enjoyed over the years the array of scarves that he has managed to produce and wear with a certain fetching panache. But overall, sir, I think it's the way in which he has conducted himself as a Speaker that gives us great confidence in supporting this nomination today. He had a great saying, and has a great saying, and I'm sure we'll hear it again, that courtesy is contagious, and he always shows great courtesy to all members of the House. We look forward to supporting his nomination, sir.
The question is the motion be agreed to. The Honourable Shadow Leader of the House.
Mr. Speaker, I somewhat reluctantly rise to support this nomination because I think members opposite will understand that occasionally Mr. Robertson feels that it's really important to show his independence from his party, and I think it's sometimes he is harder, sometimes much harder on the opposition than he is in the government. Mr. Speaker, Ross has been around for a long time. He does test every now and again your definition of business attire. I'm not sure that the multicoloured scarves are normal business attire, but you give him the flexibility to do that. He is someone who does know his standing orders really well. He's got the office next to mine. I see him studying them. He comes prepared to the House to rule on matters, and those matters quite often arise, and he, as a result of that, he is well prepared. Mr. Speaker, while the expression that the Leader of the House has used is one which has been commonly used in the House by Ross Robertson, it's not his most memorable one. There were a few members of our caucus who were left from the period when he was first a member, when the caucus was in some trouble, disarray. 87 to 90 was not the best of times, and I think it's long enough now to let members know his classic expression when the government was running into trouble. He said, "This government has too many balls in the fire."
The question is the motion be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. The contrary, no. The ayes have it.
Speaker.
Ross Robertson.
Mr. Speaker, kia ora tātou no reira te whare, inga iwi, inga rio, inga hawe wha tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Mr. Speaker, it is with humility that I gratefully accept the honour that you, my parliamentary colleagues, have offered me to serve this House as one of your presiding officers. Not my first time, Mr. Brownlee, you're right. In fact, it's my fourth. An unprecedented occurrence for an Assistant Speaker in an MMP Parliament. I consider it both an honour and a privilege to serve this 50th New Zealand Parliament, blessed as it is, with many new talents, alongside seasoned politicians who are accustomed to the delicate difference of opinion in this place. And I will ensure that every member has the fullest opportunity to defend and deliver his or her visions according to the letter of the standing orders and Speaker's rulings. And in the spirit of engagement that our public expect. For this is a robust Parliament, a place for full and vigorous debate, but contributions will be made with respect to the traditions of the House as enshrined in the standing orders. This is a place where continuous streams of ideas are tested. It is like a river that flows from bank to bank, so that its true potential is realised for all. Mr. Speaker, this House is a symbol of integrity, and the integrity The integrity of all honourable members is to be upheld, and every voice shall be heard in accordance with our standing orders. All members are honourable, and that is it. We refer to each other as honourable, despite what we may think is otherwise, because we are aspirational. We call a member what we would want for them all to become. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank those from the last Parliament who understood when the need arose to make firm but fair decisions. And I serve this House as Parliament's person. My commitment is to continue to serve with the same values and vision that I've served before, firm, fair and impartial. Ti hei mori ora, no reira tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
The Honourable Leader of the House.
Mr. Speaker, I'm sure all members will go into the long recess contemplating what a river that didn't flow from bank to bank might look like. Mr. Speaker, I move a government notice of motion number 4 in my name relating to the reinstatement of business. Mr. Speaker, there's been some comment in recent days about the size of the current order paper. It does have a lot of legislation in it. It is important legislation, and the government does intend to progress most of it, although some will obviously come under review, but we want to take some time in order that all opinions might be sought about that. The only 2 bits of business that are not reinstated are 2 notice of motions that have been picked up in the new standing orders. One of those relates to the privilege of the House, and it would be my advice to all members to consult the new standing orders to become familiar with what the new conditions are around that particular aspect of privilege. Further, Mr. Speaker, the second motion deals with extended sitting hours. The House, as members will know, sits for about 17 hours a week, but you lose an hour for question time, which is a valuable contribution and should be seen as such, and then a further hour for the general debate. So the legislation time, all going well, is around about 13 and a half hours a week. Not a long time to advance the work that always accumulates on the order paper. So this provision, which was previously noted in a notice of motion, has been modified somewhat and put into standing orders so that the House may claim extra hours in order to conduct its business, largely by agreement with the Business Committee. I think that is a very, very positive step forward. So, Mr. Speaker, with those few comments, I'm happy to move this motion.
The question is the motion be agreed to. The Honourable Shadow Leader of the House.
Mr. Speaker, we again will be supporting this motion. I endorse the comments that the Leader of the House has made on the extended hours and the ability which is the government's and one which, of course, we hope to use at some stage in the not-too-distant future to do government business in a way which is important but not urgent. And I think there's been considerable misuse of urgency, or maybe urgency is a misnomer for a system of getting through the job. Overtime, my colleague Ruth Dyson says, is a good way of putting it. And the way that it works is that if there is substantial agreement at the Business Committee, then it can happen on a Friday. Otherwise, it will happen on a Wednesday and Thursday, and the government will lose the select committees as a result of that, which seems fair. The only other point that I'd like to make is a request to the select committees to look very carefully at the business before them that was not referred from the House and is not picked up as a result of this, and to ensure that the good work that was done by previous select committees is brought to its conclusion and brought back here.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The House is suspended until 2 p.m. today for the address in reply.